Soper leading the way, 55 nations signed up for the Global Malaria Eradication Program in 1948. Their goal? To wipe malaria from the face of the earth by using the most powerful weapon to date, a chemical spray called DDT.
DDT revolutionized vector control. Because it was so cheap, you could apply vector control to whole countries.
The initial results were dramatic. Malaria was either sharply curtailed or eliminated from nearly 40 countries. But just as Soper and his colleagues were on the cusp of victory, the campaign stalled. The enemy proved to be more resilient than anyone had imagined.
Mosquitoes are tough buggers. Nobody had recognized just how quickly mosquitoes would develop resistance to DDT. And secondly, no one had anticipated that DDT would have some very significant environmental impacts that people would start to agitate against.
Commercial farmers had been quick to jump on the DDT bandwagon because it easily killed crop-destroying insects. But it killed other creatures as well and was harmful to the environment.
A biplane sprays a field.
In 1972, DDT was widely banned, and the Global Malaria Eradication Program collapsed.
Chemicals form a white fog trailing from the plane.
Sadly, they never even reached Africa, where the disease was spreading fast. Today, more people die of malaria than ever before.
Jeffrey Sachs.
Malaria is off the radar screen. It doesn't get the support, doesn't get the funding, doesn't get the attention that it deserves, even if it is one of the key factors holding back Africa's development today.
Judith Otiambo walks in a field.
Without large-scale spraying, the burden of fighting malaria has fallen completely on medicines, many of which are no longer effective. Some experts believe we should bring back DDT, but with a safer spraying strategy.
Donald Hopkins, the Carter Center.
There was never a problem from spraying DDT in people's homes against mosquitoes that transmit malaria. The environmental problems came from farmers using DDT in much larger amounts to protect their crops. We need to use DDT now to help as another important tool, and a relatively inexpensive tool, to protect a lot more people from dying of malaria.
One day after taking SP, Judith Otiambo's son Ben is feeling a little better, but her grandson Kevin seems to be getting worse.
Judith takes out medicine. Kevin stares, his dark eyes wide.
With the help of her daughter, she sets off on the 2-hour walk to the clinic.
Carrying the boys, they trudge down a dirt road past cattle, now at the clinic.
Both children are tested for malaria. Ben tests negative.
A clinic worker stares into a microscope.
Kevin is positive. The SP is not working. All Kevin's doctor can do is prescribe quinine, the oldest malaria treatment, to be given in combination with SP.
The doctor writes in a notebook.
Taking a combination of drugs, even those that individually have lost their power, has often produced good results. Judith buys the quinine and more SP. They're the only medications she can afford.
She doesn't have money to come back in case any complication develops. If she doesn't get the treatment properly, the child will probably die.
Edwin Odor, Bondo District Hospital. Our view drifts over fields dotted with scrub brush and trees.
With newer medications too expensive for poor people, and vaccines still in development, malaria remains one of the most intractable and deadly diseases in the world. But the situation is not completely hopeless, thanks to the behavior of nocturnal mosquitoes. They like to live in the thatch of people's huts, where they wait until nightfall.
Now a crescent moon glows in the night sky. A mosquito flies off a thatched roof and lands on the back of a man's hand. The man stirs in his sleep as the mosquito crawls.
They come out to feed on sleeping people, a trait that has led to a simple way to combat malaria. Bed nets treated with insecticide.
Officials hand out nets.
CDC did a study in an area with very, very intense malaria transmission. 130,000 people were provided bed nets. And sure enough, we saw that you could reduce transmission of the deadliest malaria by 90% just by keeping them under bed nets.
Mosquitoes alight on the netting. Now, outside the hut, Kevin plays with a toy truck.
1 week after his trip to the clinic, things are looking up for Kevin.
When we got home from the clinic, I gave him the medicine and he started to get better.
Kevin may not have gotten the best drug therapy, but he survived malaria this time around. And the chances of Kevin and Ben staying malaria-free have just increased tremendously. The film crew donated a $5 bed net, something Judith could not have afforded on her own.
She hangs the net from the roof of her hut.
But millions of other children won't be so fortunate.
Niels Dollaire.
There's no reason that the world has to sit by and watch 1 million African children die from malaria each year. No reason at all. Most of those kids could be saved through a combination of sleeping under bed nets, of early case detection and treatment with first-line anti-malarials.
All of it requires financial resources beyond the means of malaria-impacted regions, but utterly, and I'll say it a third time, utterly within the means of the rich world.
Jeffrey Sachs.
We'd hardly notice.
Judith blows out the lantern in her hut and walks out through a curtained door. Now, mist hangs near rolling green hills.
Far across the African continent, in the mountains of Togo, another insect-borne disease known as river blindness has long haunted the people of the Kara River basin.
Leaning over from the riverbank, women wash clothes in the water.
But unlike malaria, river blindness is now coming under control, thanks to a combination of Western medicine and local activism.
A woman in a brightly colored robe addresses a crowd. Now our view glides along a calm, muddy river.
As far back as anyone can remember, blindness has lived here. The people have a saying, the river eats your eyes. But the river itself is not the culprit. The disease is transmitted by an insect, not a mosquito in this case, but a tiny black fly.
Clinging to human flesh, the fly swells red.
The flies breed in the river, where they ingest the larvae of a parasitic worm. The larvae start to grow inside the fly and are passed to humans when the fly bites. Once inside the bloodstream, they fully mature and begin multiplying.
A microscopic view shows the worms.
Over a 15-year lifespan, the adult worms produce millions of offspring that travel through the body, causing unbearable itching. They also enter the eye, producing scarring and eventually blindness.
A man scratches his raw skin.
These people are itching, scratching all the time, and it's a miserable way to live. People commit suicide because it's the first thing they know in the morning, the last thing they know at night.
Bill Fagey, Emory University.
Many victims of river blindness lose their sight in their mid-30s.
A young woman carries a water basin on her head.
But for Jillian, the world went dark when she was still a teenager.
When I gave birth to my children, it hurt me that I could not see their faces. There have been many times when I try opening my eyelids as wide as possible, hoping I will see again, but I don't.
With her baby riding on her back, she taps a stick in the tall grass, then picks up a bundle of wood.
For Jillian, daily survival is fraught with danger. To gather wood for cooking, she must wander across unknown terrain, unable to see snakes or other hazards.
Her eyes closed, she carries the bundle on her head.
My prayer is that my kids will grow up healthy and take care of me. If they become blind, what hope does any of us have?